It's understanding who your students are and crafting the opportunity around the wicked problems or any of the other pieces that you're doing with those students in mind and letting them co-design with you.
Shifting Schools. I'm your host, Jeff Utecht, and in today's episode, we dive into bold educational innovation with Dr. Annalise Corbet, author of Hacking School: 5 Strategies to Link Learning to Life. You'll hear how the PASS Foundation emerged from global conversations about student readiness and why it continues to challenge outdated educational structures. We'll unpack the idea of STEM identity and explore 5 powerful, durable Kevlar threads that Annalise argues are essential for lasting school transformation: student agency, cultural relevance, mastery-based learning, transdisciplinary approaches, and problem-based design. And yes, we go deep on wicked problems, what they are, and how they build real-world resilience and critical thinking in our students. Dr. Annalise Corbet is the CEO of the PASS Foundation, a pioneering nonprofit she founded in 2000 to bring research and real-world learning into classrooms and communities. A trained anthropologist and archaeologist, she has taught at Eastern Carolina University and has grown the PASS Foundation from one school partnership to an international force in educational R&D. Through the PASS Innovation Lab and the Learning Unboxed podcast, Dr. Corbet continues to connect schools with the meaningful, future-focused work that prepares learners not just for exams, but for life. Whether you're a teacher, administrator, or just someone who cares deeply about the future of education, this conversation is packed with insight, real talk, and ideas you can bring to your school and community right now. Get ready for a passion-filled episode. And with that, on with the show.
A quick pause before we dive back in. Since all summer long, we are talking about the future world of work, we know any future is only possible when we help students face the challenges of the now. That's exactly why we want to tell you about something that's going to change the way you understand your students' lives. It comes from the groundbreaking group at Alongside, an AI-assisted mental health support tool built specifically for K-12 schools. And this summer, Shifting Schools listeners can be among the very first to access Alongside's brand new 2025 Youth Mental Health Report. It's packed with insights drawn from over 250,000 anonymous AI chats students had on Alongside's evidence-based platform over the past school year. Here's just a small glimpse of what you'll learn. Why teens say sleep is one of their biggest struggles. What's making school life balance feel impossible? The unexpected ways boys are learning to ask for help. Why confidential, self-guided AI tools resonate so strongly with students, and what the research is showing about how tools like this can be used in safe and effective ways. Want the report and bonus access to an exclusive webinar? Head to www.alongside.care/shifting to get on that list. We're proud to have Alongside as a sponsor this summer, and even prouder to help spotlight their work in reimagining student mental health. Check out the show notes to learn more or head straight to www.alongside.care/shifting. And now, back to the conversation.
All right, welcome back to another episode of Shifting Schools. So excited today to be here with Annalise, author of the book, Hacking School: 5 Strategies to Link Learning to Life. Annalise, welcome to the podcast. I'm excited to dive into your new book, talk about the research that you have been doing over the last few years. And to get us started, you start out with the book talking about your past with past. I like how that all kind of works out. So maybe get us started in where's the foundation of this come from, and then we're going to jump into some ideas coming out of the book and talk about what this might mean for education in the future as we try to hack schools. So thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. So, the origin story of Past Foundation, right? So, I was a applied research scientist. My background, I'm an anthropologist and archaeologist, and so I was a university professor for many years. And in that role, in conversations with other faculty at numerous institutions all over the world, we were really, really struggling. What was going on about the late '90s, early 2000s with the students that were showing up in our programs.
Mm,
These are super smart young people,
right.
incredibly capable. And what we saw repeatedly was that they lacked a whole set of fundamental skills. I always used to say, these were super smart people who couldn't navigate their way out of a paper bag with a Klieg light on their foreheads, right? Totally not fair, but
Oh,
from my own field experience, so incredibly true, right?
yeah.
And so we started having a series of conversations across the globe trying to understand this phenomenon. What's going on? Because these
Mm,
kiddos could kick the GRE butt or the
yeah.
MCAT or the LSAT or
Yeah.
whatever exams they had to take to get into grad school, for example, or undergrad. They were capable. That wasn't the issue. And, we had the same conversations with industry partners,
Mm,
the places where these kids were going for their first jobs. And industry was telling us the same things. And, the interesting thing is industry's blaming post secondary blames K 12, K 12
sure.
blames family and community. And nobody was owning A, the
Mm,
problem, or B, a set of solutions. And I would argue at that time, it wasn't solutions. We were going to get to solutions at some point, right? But we had to fundamentally understand the disconnect. We needed to
mm,
ask a different set of questions.
yeah.
And that's the genesis of the Past Foundation, which is a stupid name, honestly. It's an acronym for partnering anthropology with science and technology, because what we understood at the heart of this, and this was long before people were talking about STEM and we were using all of those
Yeah.
insane acronyms as well,
Yeah.
in the world of education. And it was really around the idea that if we could go back and put humans at the center and ask questions about what the heck are we preparing kids for to begin
Hmm.
with and how are we going to get there, if we had a different set of questions, maybe we would come up with a set of solutions that could be meaningful. And that was 25 years ago.
Wow, that's great. And talk a little bit about your work now. Where are you at now? What are you doing now? You started this 25 years ago. Where is this expanded to?
So we are based in Ohio, but we work
Hmm.
all over the US and other parts of the world. We've trained just shy of 25,000 teachers around the globe in
Wow.
transdisciplinary problem-based teaching and learning, which we could talk about that. That's
Yeah.
all the purpose of the book, if you will. And about 3.2 million students now have gone through the programming, if you will. And the work today is really at our heart. We are an education R&D prototyping organization, is how I like to describe the work that we
Mm,
do. And we do that by partnering up with business and industry or post-secondary or community, K-12. It doesn't really make any difference. And we co-design new solutions that
mm,
fit the local need. And we field test them. We've got an entire research division. We do the work that K-12 would love to be able to do, but oftentimes just with the constraints of the day to day and the inability, right? So
sure.
within the system that we're operating in, to stretch too far outside in the moment. But if we have a finalized sort of solution that we could plug and play in our
Yeah.
community, that it could be a game changer, right? So we can serve in the capacity of being both the catalyst and the impetus, but more importantly, the designers, co-designers, and the field testers of that idea, so that what we actually plug in doesn't create a pause.
Ooh, I love that. I love that. Well, I want to dig into your book a little bit and talk about some of the things that I think, resonated with me. I think will resonate with our listeners, and just get a little more in depth of some of the things out of the book. So, kind of at the start of the book, you talk about a moment where you witnessed this quote, what you call STEM identity,
Mhm.
with students. How did that change? What is the idea of STEM identity? And then how did that kind of become the almost like catalyst for a lot of this change that you're seeing?
Sure. So we refer to STEM identity as that moment when students can see themselves with endless possibilities.
Mm,
And what we know, right, especially and it could you could apply this same concept to anything. We do a lot of work in STEM because there's so many career and job opportunities that are available across those disciplines. And we also know that there is very limited pathways for many, many students around the world to get access into
yeah,
these careers that are high paying, they're sustainable, they're invigorating, there are lots and lots of things. So
yeah.
for us, we really focused on understanding the levers that
Mm,
turn kids on and off. We've all seen the imagery, we've experienced the, oh my gosh, just can't do that math, right?
yeah,
As an example, right?
yeah,
Well, all kids can do math,
yeah.
right? But we have these mindsets and these experiences that come along the way that become these barriers that set us up for believing that we cannot. And so for us, STEM identity is understanding when those things happen because they're levers. That's all they are. Well, if a lever can turn a kid off, a lever can also turn a kid back on. And
Mm,
what we see is that when those levers are shifted, that is when students embrace their STEM identity. And it is
mm.
profound
That's
when
cool.
this happens. And you can watch it. Their entire demeanor shifts and changes because all of a sudden they believe that
Mm.
they can do anything.
I love that. I love that. In the book, you spend a lot of time talking about what you refer to as the 5 key strategies, or what you call the Kevlar threads throughout the book. Why the metaphor of Kevlar? And can you kind of talk about what those 5 key strategies are?
Sure. So the metaphor for Kevlar is because Kevlar is incredibly strong. It's
Mm,
resilient. It's lightweight. It can be woven into just about anything, and you don't even know that it's there. Right? It's powerful. It can
yeah.
stop a bullet.
Yeah.
Right? And yet it's incredibly lightweight. It's malleable. It's all of those sorts of things. And so when we think about these 5 key elements and the genesis of the 5 key elements is I started to ask these questions as we were really getting, at sort of the 15 and 20 year mark in this work
Hmm.
and going from community to community, school district to school district, going through these transformative processes, these initiatives that just keep coming and coming and coming and coming and coming, right? Because the system itself of education, K-12
Yeah.
in the US, but other parts of the world as well, the system is not being re-engineered, right?
Right.
That is its heart is the problem.
Yeah.
So but you kept having these initiatives coming over and over and over again. And but some of these transformative processes, they were sticking. They were
Mm,
lasting 10 years or more. The people who were involved with them at the beginning could leave and move on to other things. And yet this powerful thing, this transformative idea in education in a particular community or location was still living strong. And I
mm.
wanted to understand what that was. And that's what one of the things that we found is that in those initiatives that lasted 10 years or more, they all had these 5 things. They had other things because they're all locally derived,
Sure.
but
Right.
these 5 existed in every single one that persisted. And there's a lot of value in understanding that, right? And so
Hmm.
the 5 things were that student agency is all over whatever it is, that honoring of the student's ability to have a role in their own learning and their destiny. The second is around cultural relevancy or resiliency, and that's not about politics, for
Yeah.
those from the US. It has nothing to do with all of those sorts of things that are happening in local communities or state legislators or what legislatures or whatnot. It's about recognizing that whatever we're teaching, whatever we're learning, if our kids can't identify with it in some way, they will never engage with it. That's
Right.
so cultural relevancy. The third thing is mastery or competency based. We have to eliminate the artificial time constraints around on Tuesday at 2 p.m. We're going to spend 15 minutes. And at the end of that 15 minutes, you're going to know
Know
deeply this
something. Yeah.
thing. That's insane,
Yeah.
right? So mastery is another piece to it. And then transdisciplinary. And that basically means we're going to remove the artificial silos that are content. The real world doesn't function that way.
Yeah.
Right? I don't stop what I'm doing to do social studies and then stop what I'm doing to do, you know, some language or a science or whatever. That's, again, insane. So if we want people to function well out in the world, then we need to teach them to function in the world. And so what we're teaching has to be reflective of that. So that's the transdisciplinary piece. And then the last Kevlar thread is problem-based. And that is that hands-on, fully approachable way, a tangible, touchable way, and understanding the interplay of all the different pieces and parts. So those are the 5.
So here's the thing, and this is where, as I was reading the book and going through this section of the book, which I read again this morning before we got on, none of those are new. I became an educator in the 90s. All of those things. I was taught problem-based learning, project-based learning, UDL, like you name it. We've always said that students have to have agency in their learning. We've always said that you have to engage. Why aren't we doing it?
It's hard. It's hard, right? Because, and here's the reason it's hard. It's not because the educators don't want to do that. Most educators go to teaching because they love the learning process, right? They want to really engage meaningfully in that space. But the system that we're currently operating within is so obsolete. It's based on a completely different model, right? It's that old factory-based, so one of the ways that I like to think about it, and I don't even remember who said this, it's not my phrase, but I can't for the life of me remember who said this way back when, but the shift we're talking about right now is not really even about 21st century education, right? We're talking about at least 22nd century education. And we're talking about a shift away from an industrial model or a system to an ecological one. And if you think about how those two kinds of systems are engineered so very, very differently with different purposes in mind, that's part of the problem. And so that's the reason we're not doing it, right? And most educators are doing some of these consciously or unconsciously in their classrooms, but very few of them are functioning inside of a system that allows them to take all 5 of them on every single day by design.
And how much of that is not even the K-12 system, but I will be working with, I'll just use high school teachers because it's usually where I get they're like, well, Jeff, I would love to do that, except my kids have to pass the SAT to go to university. And so now, to your point, as we started, now we're blaming the university system because they say, well, universities don't want those kids. Universities want kids that can score at least 1,100 on an SAT. And I'm not doing my job unless I'm teaching kids to pass the SAT so that they can go to university because I want to get kids out of poverty. And that's how you do it. You go to university and the SAT is there. And I find
and then the kids bomb out because they're not prepared to learn in the university setting.
And so how do we get rid of the SAT? And I think one of the things that's fascinating to me, right? Because I do see that. And I think after the pandemic or during the pandemic, we saw a lot of universities pull back and say, we're not going to use SAT scores. And that lasted for like 2 years. And now all of a sudden they've all put this SAT back in. So when we talk about these systems, I think that is a huge one that I hear about everywhere I go. And I work internationally as well. And it's the same thing I hear internationally. Like, I'd love to do all of this, Jeff, but my parents expect our kids to get a minimum this on the IB score, a minimum 1,200 on an SAT. And the only way we know to make that happen, because that test is set up this way, is to teach this way. And then that trickles down from high school to middle school because middle school's got to prepare them. And next thing you know, we're all frustrated that the system's not changing. So when you look at this from the work that you're doing across K-12 educational institutions and the workplace, do you see some of that starting to change? Are we making cracks in those walls across an entire system? Do you see any of that?
I'm seeing threads of it by design, very deliberately starting to happen. And the thing that's really interesting to me is that if you make the shift, so if a high school makes the shift and says, we're going to take this on and we're really going to do it this way, this full transformative way, your test scores will go up. But it's really hard to embrace that because it's terrifying. There will be a wobble. There's great research actually about this. There's going to be a dip before they go up, right? There's fabulous research about this.
Yeah, lots of research.
But everybody's like, but not my kid.
Yeah, I don't want my kid to be in the dip.
Right. But the reality is we see this all the time in our work. And when you go all in, you don't have to stop to teach. You might have to teach a kid how to actually navigate the exams, because we need to be able to have those quantitative exams. It's super important. We need that data, right? We need that opportunity, right? In terms of the way that we're thinking about assessment. But it doesn't have to be the end all be all. And if we stop teaching to that, right, other than maybe some process pieces just so kids know what to do, right? Their test scores go up, and they go
Mm,
up substantially. And I always say this all the time. I would put up our kids against any kids out there.
yeah, I agree with you. I love these two quotes from your book as we were just talking about this. And I just want to quote from your book. I love this one. What if the effect of the COVID-19 pandemic on education isn't about new models of instruction, but instead is the larger realization that our current approach to system thinking in our path without a relevant destination? This raises the question, what are we preparing kids for? This is a seemingly simple, maybe even downright foolish question to ask, and it is far more complicated than 50 or even 100 years ago. And I think that is part of like this constant thing. And for better or for worse, I think the pandemic really showed holes in our educational system and where we are preparing. I was reading even a stat just the last 2 days because I do my other work is around generational leadership, right?
Mhm.
And my quote and the quote here, and the audience, our audience has heard me say this a million times, but like my tagline is preparing students for their future, not our past. And there was some great
Love that.
research that just came out to I think, and this goes with our conversation here, that we have an unemployment rate right now of like 4.2%, which is still quite low in the United
Mhm.
States.
Mhm.
But for new graduates coming out of university, it's actually double that. A new graduate leaving university today, it has an unemployment rate right around 8.5%. So this idea that this system is set up to create one type of worker
Mhm.
or one type of mindset or one type of whatever it has is showing that we are graduating students out the other end, because us in K-12 is to prepare kids for their future, not our past.
Right.
But the future we're preparing them for isn't the future that in many cases are the jobs that are there. And so all of a sudden these kids have gone into universities, are coming out, and they're just like, well, but I've got the piece of paper, I've got the degree, I did the
Mhm.
learning like they told me to, I got 1200 on the SAT, and the jobs aren't there, or the right jobs aren't there, or the right mindsets, which I believe is actually more like the jobs are there, we show that the jobs are there, but they don't have the mindset of going through this. And one of the things I love about in the book is you talk about how do we create, and I love this. This is a quote from page 24, wicked problems, which are complex, continuous, and defy complete definition and resolution. Can you talk about this idea of wicked problems?
Yeah, and I think that this gets to the heart of what we want
Yeah.
from all those graduates, right? All those young people entering the workforce. We want them to be epic, unbound problem solvers.
Mm,
We want them to bump up against anything, any task, any idea, any constraint, and just be able to start breaking it down. And we
mm,
also, and the reason wicked problem is as opposed to just traditional problem solving is, so the premise behind a wicked problem is that there is no single solution. And a wicked problem is something that is so big, right? It's so audacious, that it has so many different pieces and parts that are all related that you could spend a lifetime working on it and never solving the entire thing, because it lends itself to you having to ask the next question and ask the
mm,
next question and ask the next question. That leads to great thinkers. People who can think. They can take in data, they can understand technology, they can understand science, they can apply mathematics, and they are unafraid of all the things they don't know,
mm,
and they're willing to go out and find the information they need to apply it to trying to solve or come up with a possible solution, because a wicked problem is going to have numerous
mm.
potential solutions.
And I think a wicked problem is inherent interdisciplinary.
Ah,
Like before
absolutely.
you get
Yeah.
started, you have to know the history of the problem,
Right.
right? So now
Right.
we're into history, and then you have to
Right.
understand what are different methods that have already been tried.
Right.
What's the next step? Where do we
Right.
go? And then I think that's where you start getting these big ideas, right, around wicked problems. And it reminds me back when I was teaching sixth grade, and we had one question. I was the way that they split it up. I was the social studies science teacher, and then the other teacher taught the other things. A small school in Saudi Arabia, but we had one question for the entire year because we were studying great civilizations, and so the question was, what makes a civilization great?
Great. Yeah.
And especially in Saudi Arabia, I had 17. I had 28 kids and 17 different nationalities. And every nationality believes their civilization is great,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And yet we're supposed to be studying the greatest, right? The
Yeah,
Romans and the Greeks,
right,
because that's
right.
what you have to do. But I'm thinking it was a great question because there is no simple answer of what makes a civilization great. And everybody believes their civilization is great. Everybody's trying to improve their civilization. So if everybody's trying to improve, then what makes a great civilization? And at the end of the year, that was the exam question. What makes a great civilization, and why do you believe your civilization is also great, right? And I think it's those kind of things. Like there's no simple answer, and you have to get into the science and technology and the arts and there's so much that goes into a big, beautiful question like that there is no right answer. And that's okay. And I think we're so stuck on there is a right answer, and we set kids up for this, and but you have to get past this idea that there might not be a right answer. There might be multiple right answers, or there might not be an answer at all.
Right. And we set kids up to see failure if there's not a singular answer or
Yeah.
response, right? And I think that the other thing that I love about utilizing the wicked problem as the mechanism by which you could really recraft everything that's happening on a learner's journey is because it builds confidence and resiliency so quickly, which gets back to that identity formation,
Sure.
right? No matter which labels that you want to put onto it. So that's one of the reasons why it's so profound, right? Because when you have a student that can bump up against something and you hand them something they've never experienced, they know nothing about, and they're just like, okay, great, I'll be back to you in a week.
Yeah.
Wow, that's profound.
Yeah.
Other than, okay, tell me where I should get started. You can watch the kids sort of step through the process of becoming that confident of a learner.
How do you, so I think this is something else that I've ran into in the work that I've done as well, consulting, is I finally I get a teacher who really wants to take this, right? They read your book. They're all in on this. They want to create wicked problems. They're a 8th grade ELA teacher. Doesn't matter, right? Let's pick 8th grade. And they try to implement some of this stuff, and they instantly are failing because the kids just want the questions that they can answer and get the score on. Because by the time we get them to middle school, high school, they're already learned to quote unquote play school.
Right.
And so then you have a teacher who's now very frustrated because they want to buy in. They understand that this is the path forward. To your point, I mean, every teacher wants this, right? This
Correct.
is what teachers want to do.
Mm-hmm.
How do you start to break down for a child who is used to playing school one way, and all of a sudden gets that awesome teacher in 9th grade that says, no, we're going to be dealing with wicked problems, and the parents push back, the students push back and say, no. I just need to, like, what chapter are we on this week? How do I read the chapter in the book and learn about the Romans or whatever it happens to be? How do you support the changing of the mindset?
Yeah. So that's why you need all 5 of these things, right? You have to have all 5. And so that's where agency and that cultural relevancy piece come to play, right? Because the reality is even your most type A kid, right? Who's the one who wants to know on Tuesday at, 2 p.m., I'm on page 42 and we're answering question number 3, right?
Yeah.
So, it's understanding who your students are and crafting the opportunity around the wicked problems or any of the other pieces that you're doing with those students in mind and letting them co-design with you. That's the key. And yet that's really, really hard because we're not trained as educators to do that. We're trained to be the expert standing at the front of the room. Yeah. Even the best teachers are still trained that way. Yeah. They know that's not the way, and many of them don't run their own classrooms that way, but there's still this tendency, to your point, right? And so, the breaking down of that is going on that journey together. And I've watched it happen time and time again. And as soon as you can get that educator to embrace getting to know the kids and having the kids co-design with them And it takes a little bit. You got to scaffold the kids. You can't throw it all at them at once. They will get on board pretty
Mm,
quickly if you do it with that kind of deliberation. But
mm.
you're not wrong. It's incredibly difficult to do. The families, now that's a whole nother conversation, right?
Yeah.
Because it was good enough for me. Why is it not good enough for my kid?
Yeah. I was supporting a school to do a very similar thing, and the parents held an emergency parent meeting and made the school go back to A through F because that's what school should look like. Right. And I think at the root of it, this is what, a lot, again, when I'm working with these communities, this is the hardest part is like for better or for worse, education, specifically here in the US, but I would say around the world, education is the one thing that everybody in the room has gone through. Whether it worked for you or not, whether you were successful after you went through it or not, everybody went through it.
Mhm.
Everybody remembers their best teacher. Everybody remembers their worst teacher. And if it was successful for you, which for the majority of us it was, not everyone, but for the majority of people, it is a successful institution. If it was successful for me, then I wanted to be successful for my child. And the way that it's successful is to look exactly like it did when I went
Right.
through school.
Correct.
And so there's all of this, like, just social pressure on an institution that is constantly saying we want change, for the community saying we want change. And as soon as schools try to take on a radical change, they're like, whoa, 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 whoa. Where's the A? Okay, you changed A to a 4. Okay, I can get on board with that. I get 4, 3, 2, 1 is A, B, C, D, E, F. I can get that. Like, that's a radical change right now. Like, we're not getting, how do you support, what does that look like to support a community? Like, how much community involvement does there need to be when a school decides, or a district says, look, we're going to prepare students for their future, not our past, and their future is not sitting in, industrial revolution putting buttons on jeans. That's just not where we're headed. How do you support a community doing that?
Yeah, so it's hard for let's just call it what
Yeah.
it is. It's very difficult. I think a couple of things. So the first one that I've seen in our own work time and time again, where we have the greatest success, and I start with districts and I say, look, you're willing to make this change. Good on you. That's super awesome. But the hill you're about to climb is epically steep,
Yeah.
right? So start with a coalition of the willing.
Mm.
Start with a coalition of the willing.
Almost
And
like a
that
school inside a school, or like a small cohort.
yeah,
Mm,
something, or a set of teachers who
mm,
say, "Hey, I would like to try this." The same goes with the families,
mm.
right? Explain what it is. You hold those community forums. Who wants in? Because you're going to have families who because school, as we know, it doesn't work for a lot of kids,
Yeah.
especially as they get older and with the social pressures and
Yeah.
with the
Yeah.
mental health issues that we're
Yeah.
seeing, especially post COVID, it's only getting worse.
Yeah.
So you've got a lot of families out there that, if given another choice, whether they have any understanding of that other choice or not, they're still going to opt in because they're terrified of losing their kids. And
Yeah.
that can be defined 1,000 different ways.
Yeah.
So start with a coalition of the willing. And that coalition of the willing then becomes the proving ground for the concept. And here's what I can tell you is that I've seen it so many times, right? And it takes a lot of work, and everybody has to recognize, and you have those community conversations that are very frank. We're going to see a dip. This is what's going to happen. We're going to have all these supports around this. We're going to give this thing a try. And oh, by the way, you're committing to this for X period of time. This is not just like a one and done, and we're going to see what happens at the end of the year. If it's done with fidelity and the community is engaged in that conversation, those coalitions of the willing,
Mm,
what I've seen over and over again as the next year, so May rolls around, right? And
mm,
phone calls are being made to the administration. Don't you dare put my child in the traditional path or
mm,
classroom next year. Don't you do it.
mm.
These are the same parents that hesitantly opted in to begin with, right?
Yeah.
And then you got the other parents, oh my gosh, I want my kid in that program. It happens.
Yeah.
And I think it happens all the time, but you have to start with that coalition of the willing, because if
Mm,
you try to go, I would argue, if you try to go all in mass, right? That's just a top down approach saying you shall do. You're
mm,
voluntelling everybody, students, families, educators, and that's not going to work.
mm. And I also think we're in a time period where if we're not getting innovative, we're going to continue to see students go to private schools, We now have a micro school movement going on because I think there is this parents are seeing and wanting different. We are also seeing in public schools, like I've got a public school district here in the state of Washington that now has broken out just at the high school at this point, but have broken out almost a smaller specific school. So they have a STEM school,
Mm-hmm.
and then they're creating a second high school that is all based on project-based learning.
Mm-hmm.
And then they still have their, we call big box school, right? Like their traditional
They're
school.
comprehensive
School, and you're allowing parents again that choice
Mm-hmm.
within the public school system.
Correct.
If you're not allowing parents choice within the public school system, they're going to go to the charter school. They're going to go to the private school because we're not willing to innovate within the system that we have.
Yeah,
And to your point,
exactly.
you don't have to be the entire, it doesn't have to be the entire comprehensive high school, but 300 kids, you know, in a community of, 10,000 high school kids is a nice small cohort that can continue to move forward. So I love that idea. I think it's a great approach. We're talking to Annalise Corbet, author of Hacking School: 5 Strategies to Link Learning to Life. We will make sure that there's a link to the book in the show notes where you can go buy it and read it for yourself. Incredible work. And I think it's just very motivating for teachers of like, this is what we want to do. This is the passion. Take the book, take it to your principals, take it to your superintendents, and see where we're going. As you kind of think about the future, and you imagine a student 20 years from now shaped by all 5 of the strategies in your book, what kind of citizen, worker, or thinker do you imagine they become? Where do you see this unfolding if we can get to this place?
So I think first and foremost, these people are invested in their communities. They understand what it means to be a citizen. They're well-rounded, they're engaged. They understand the systems of their communities, they understand the policies of their communities, they understand the work of their communities and the opportunities that are there. And they're all in, right? Because they're very well-rounded thinkers, they're competent, they can speak, they can communicate, right, in ways that allow them to be deeply engaged. When I step back and sort of look at the group of young people that are entering the workforce, right? They're incredibly passionate about all kinds of things right now. The young folks that are, that sort of 23 to 28 range right now. And even our older folks, but they are wandering in the wilderness with understanding how to truly have a meaningful impact beyond a very small social group. They don't understand how to plug in at the community level. And I think that is just a need to be a fully formed citizen, right? So these people are going to be global thinkers.
I love that. And it makes me think too, back to one of your pillars, that it has to be culturally relevant. I think of all the time, and I don't get to be in front of kids very often these days, but when I do, I was doing a training the last 2 times I've done AI training with students. I always talk about the environmental impact, right? Like, AI is great and all this stuff, but you have to understand there's an environmental impact, like, with water and electricity and what is this doing? And I don't I only get an hour with them, so I don't touch on it a lot, but I do touch on it. And every single feedback form that I get, the number one takeaway is I didn't understand the environmental impact.
Right.
I want to learn more about the environmental impact. And all I keep thinking is, if I was that teacher, that's the hook.
100%.
You have a generation who is very climate focused.
Yep.
And I'm so proud for them for being climate focused.
Yep.
That's the hook. That's the wicked question. How do we have AI and environmental impact? How do we make sure that our environmental impact is, and how do we change it? What do we need to do? What policies need to be like? Kids can wrestle with this stuff.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Right. And it's so fascinating to me because it's sitting right there when you ask kids, right? What was the big thing? And it was and I was like, you didn't like the cool thing that we made these funny pictures. No. They don't care about that. They care about the environmental impact this stuff's going to have, which is amazing. And I love it. But that's the question. That's the wicked question, because nobody
100%.
has an answer to it all. It's not a simple answer, right? As we wrap this up, teachers have gone, they're getting this book, they're sending this book to their principal for a summer read, whatever it might be. What's one thing you hope every educator takes away from the book? Not just intellectually, but also the mindset shift. What's your hope? What's your takeaway?
My hope and takeaway is that these educators who came to this field because of their love of learning, right, will re-engage with their own inner passions. One of the other things that I talk about all the time, the next book that I have coming out, it's called Teach Your Passion. And it's because we need our educators to be whole, fully formed people as well. They are, right? But we limit who shows up in that classroom. We say, as an educator in this particular classroom, in this particular school, you have to be this right here, whatever this happens to be.
Yeah.
Bring your whole authentic self. That's what I hope that they will get out of it, right? Because as soon as they do that, then the kids and their families will go on that journey with them because they are authentic.
I can't wait for that book. I think exactly what you're talking about it's the reason why we don't have enough teachers going into, or people wanting to be educators. And it's the reason why we have educator burnout at an all-time high.
100%.
I think all of this is wrapped into one big, beautiful, crazy bow that we call the educational system.
True.
So I'm excited to hear that book too. Hacking School, 5 Strategies to Link Learning to Life. We'll make sure to link to it down in the show notes. We're here with the author, Annalise Corbet. Annalise, thank you so much for spending time here with us today at Shifting Schools. As we get ready to sign off, if educators or administrators want to reach out to you, want to learn more, want to engage with your foundation, where should they go? What is the best way to connect?
So you can find me on LinkedIn, just Annalise Corbet, or you can go directly to the PAST Foundation website, and it's just pastfoundation.org. And there is an info sheet. We will get back to you. We've got so many different ways for you to engage in the work that we're doing.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. All of that information will be down in the show notes. So if you're driving, don't worry when you get to work, just come back over to Spotify, click on the little drop-down menu, and you'll get all those links there. You don't need to memorize them every time. Annalise, thank you so much for spending time with us today. Thank you for writing the book, and looking forward to more.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.